going on, everybody? This is Lewis Beck here on 343 Labs TV, and we are live. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in who was here already. And as some of you may know, I like to always get that chat going like right away. So if you're here, please just like drop in a little hand wave, a little hello. And so I know that you're there. We could start getting that little dialogue going. Anyway, for those of you who are joining us for the first time, welcome to 343 Labs TV. What is 343 Labs TV? Well, it is the online streaming educational branch of the school 343 Labs, which is a music production school based in New York City and now recently in Berlin. And as you can see, we have an online presence and we offer classes online and in person. More so in Berlin because Germany is way less terrifying than the United States right now in terms of coronavirus, less restrictions, etc. But we are offering in-person classes in New York City, so just be aware of that. Anyway, we offer classes in Logic, Ableton, synthesis, mixing, mastering, vocal production, composition and arrangement, songwriting, you name it. Right? Anything that the contemporary 21st century musician wants to know about, we cover, and we have tons of really experienced, awesome instructors, myself notwithstanding, to help you with all that. Anyway, so for those of you that were here last week, you'll know that what I covered was just kind of how to start getting your like home studio setup and flow established. Right, and one of the things that we first talked about was like using a MIDI interface, and how to integrate external hardware synths into your software workflow, right? So that you can actually have control over your external gear and be able to like fully optimize that workflow. And so we're kind of gonna continue along with that today to an extent, but we're gonna move a little beyond it too. And what we're going to be talking about actually is sound design. And specifically, I'm going to be talking about sound design in the context of integrating analog and digital processes together, right? So we're not going to be talking about like ADSR envelopes necessarily and stuff like that. I may mention it here and there, but like that's not going to be the core focus. Really what we're going to be talking about is like how can you actually manipulate certain analog processes and how can you optimize certain digital elements of workflow to create really unique and cool sounds that you might not be able to get just from analog or just from digital, right? So that's going to be what we're going to be focusing on today. And we're going to go ahead and get started in just a sec, but I do have to say real quick that if you have been watching this content and are not yet subscribed to our channel, please subscribe. We have so much amazing content that we're putting up there weekly. We have these streams every week. We have master classes and video tutorials and everything on there. So if this is your first time joining and you like what you're seeing today, then by all means, please hit the subscribe button afterwards or during or whenever, you're most suited to you. And also stay tuned later this week because we will be announcing, we have some prizes that are going to be announced. I believe this week is a $300 gift certificate to 343 Labs, so to help get you started on your music making journey. All right. Anyway, so let's go ahead and get started. So what I'm going to be doing, what's up, Luis? Welcome from Mexico. That's super dope. I'm glad that you're here, man. All right. So the first thing that we're going to be talking about is creating drums, and particularly from using like how to use an external drum machine to create really interesting, like, kind of unique, more unique percussion. Now the thing I should mention about like a drum machine. So what I have in front of me, right, is the TR8, and some of you may be familiar with it. It's made by Roland. And essentially what it is, right, is it has the 707, 808, and 909 with the 727 kind of little percussion expansion built into it. And it's not like a very, let's put it this way. None of the sounds you're going to hear in here are particularly revolutionary, right? All of these sounds are essentially from the Roland archive of like greatest hits, right? So you've heard these sounds on like countless hit records. You're very familiar with the sounds, just the raw tone. And so to a certain extent, it's like, what's the point of owning a drum machine in 2020 if you can just get really dope splice samples or other types of samples of like 808s, 909s, 707, stuff like that. Like, why do you need a drum machine? What's the point of having a drum machine, right? So obviously one of the first answers is like live performance. So really useful to have if you plan on performing live. And if you want to have like a really integrated live show, right? It's a lot more interesting to like be playing with a drum machine than to just be like hitting pads on your Ableton Push or, whatever it is that you might be using. But the other thing about it that I particularly think is cool is that you can use the drum machine, right, as a way to actually sort of, as like a jumping off point in terms of like building a tone from something, right? So for me, I approach synthesis from like two angles, or sound design rather, from like two angles, where it's like I'm either building a sound like totally from scratch on a synthesizer, or like recording something with a microphone and then like processing it from there. Or what I'm going to do is I'm going to take like a pre-made sample of some kind, right? Even if that sample is maybe something I just recorded, it's like a snare drum, right? And then what I'll do is I'll start applying some cool digital augmentation to it. Now, one thing that you also can do, right, with the beauty of external hardware is you can like overdrive preamps and stuff like that. And you can also actually clip your converters. And we're going to get into that in a second. That's kind of going to be the first thing that I actually talk about. So let's just jump right in. So right now I have my TR8 plugged in. It's all set up. I'm going to work at like, I don't know, 110 BPM. I like that number. So just to refresh for people from last time, I'm going to set up my MIDI settings. Excuse me. I'm going to come to synchronization, go into MIDI, and I'm going to set it up so that my computer is the clock source for my TR8. So when I press play on my computer, as you can see, my TR8 is now sequencing, right? So that's very useful and kind of an important thing to do. Not like, look, it's not critical, but what it's going to allow you to do is skip the process of having to like drag things perfectly onto time, make sure that things are in sync with your project and stuff like that. So anyhow, that's what this is doing. So I'm coming in on input 5. I know that because that's how my studio set up, or at least that's where it's plugged in. I'm coming in DI, and I'm coming in through the Heritage Audio HA73 EQ and preamp. I'm going to go ahead and write that down in the notes real quick. Right here. Just so some of you who may be curious a little bit about like, analog things that go beyond just synths, how they sound and et cetera, like that, things like that maybe if you're interested in the product, you can have a look at it. And so, as I think I mentioned last week, but for those of you that aren't aware, the HA73 is a clone of the Neve 1073. So it sort of approximates the experience of that piece of gear, which is, of course, super iconic. Now, I love using the HA73 for drums, especially because it gives it this like really beefy, rounded out low end, but also has like a certain punchiness to it that you get from using solid state transformer based preamps as opposed to like a tube preamp. Okay. Anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and press play in my DAW, and let's just start with a snare. So this is just like a basic 808 snare, right? Now, one thing that I'm going to do from my drum machine is I'm going to layer it with a hand clap sound. I'm going to shorten the decay of the declap. So that's a nice thing. So this is also the benefit of using a drum machine, is that you can quickly layer sounds together, whereas working in the DAW, right, you might have to do a little bit more work to get those to function. And then I'm going to see if I can get some kind of like snappy, kind of dirty sound layered in there too. That sounds great, actually, just like that. I like that. So the next thing that I might do is I'm going to turn down the output of my preamp, because as you can see, I'm coming in really hot. There's nothing wrong with that. And I'm going to crank the preamp gain and see if I can introduce some distortion into the signal. So there we go. There's quite a bit of saturation now in that signal. So if I crank, I'm almost cranked all the way. So if I go one more step on the dial, we're going to be hitting it so hard that it's actually going to bust the transient. Now, gain staging is a super important element of sound design in this respect. So since I only have kind of stepped stages on my preamp, and by that I mean it's going to go by intervals of 5 decibels, or magnitudes of 5 decibel increases. What I can do is I can roll back the output volume on my TR8 a little bit, just so I can kind of like really hit that sweet spot in terms of crunchiness, but also definition. I like that right about there. So I still get a little bit of grit and character on there, right? But what I'm also getting is the transient definition, so that it still like comes through and is defined. Now, maybe one thing that I also could do is I have an EQ that's built into the circuit of the preamp, and I might roll off a little bit of the high frequencies because they're a little aggressive. Yeah, so that feels a little bit more tucked, even though there's no actual mix right now, right? I'm still sort of always, in my head at least, like visualizing what I want the mix to sound like and what I want my sounds to be. And so that visualization is always really important. So one thing that I also might do is do a little bit of low shelving at about 110 hertz, which is the only option I have, quite frankly, in that range. Yeah, just to give it a little bit of a knockier kind of sound and distort that low end. Because what happens is with this particular preamp is that the EQ is before the preamp in the circuit. So it's going to affect the behavior of the saturation. So sometimes I actually use the EQ to shape the saturation that's occurring when I'm tracking. So then what I did was I just gave it a little bit of a boost at 7,000 or so, which I wasn't expecting to sound super lovely, but it does. So I might shelve off just a little bit more at about 12K, which is where the shelf is on this. And that sounds super nice. So this is essentially how I, at least, so I'll call this clap, snare, whatever if you want to call it, right? Get out of here. This is how I go about sound design in when I'm creating music, right? It's a combination of like manipulating my analog gear into getting me something kind of cool, but then also, as you'll see very quickly, I'll be able to also use some digital stuff to make it sound interesting. So that's a great starting point. And maybe one thing that I could do to really just like dirty it up a little bit would be to throw on this plugin called Decimort from D16 Audio Group. This is a bit crusher. And so what this does is it doles off the bitiness of that transient a little bit, even though I liked that when I designed it that way. But this kind of like, even though it's a digital distortion, it almost gives it a kind of like old school vintage analog haze. And I can control how much of that I want to happen by just rolling back the effects, right? The mix knob. So it sounds like I get a really nice bit of definition, kind of blurring of definition right there. So it's really a matter of taste, of course, right? So some of you would be like, that sounds really nice and bitey and sharp. And that sounds too dull, right? So yeah, so what that's doing is, right, because I'm actually bit reducing down to, let's have a look. Down to about 15, yeah, 15 and a half. And so what you're hearing, right, is the super high end, which actually gives it that little bit of like sizzle and crispiness and like airiness, is being like reduced in quality. And then I'm also introducing, I honestly have no idea what this jitter button does, but essentially I just think it makes it sort of like break up in a more interesting way. Does a little bit of like bit reduction in addition to downsampling. Not really sure, but I love it. This is my favorite bit crusher by far. So anyway, what I would now do is, right, is I'm just starting with my snare. So I'm just going to hit record. So for me, I like to kind of have a little bit of variation in tone. Right? So as you can kind of see that these waves are not identical every time. I personally love that. I think that makes the music sound a little bit more alive, a little bit more human, right? When there's this very slight amount of timbre that's changing. It kind of mimics, a like live playing a drum, right, where the drummer can't hit it perfectly the same way every time. So you can see like the transient squares off a little bit right here, but then it's like stays pretty sharp right there, squares off again there. And so all that's going to do is like on a very subtle level, right, on a very subtle psychological level, make it feel a little bit more alive, make it feel a little bit more, vibey and less computerized. And I'm all about that, right? And now I'm not taking knocks at people that aren't about that want their sound to be computerized. This is just my personal taste, right? So it really doesn't, there's no right or wrong here. So I'm going to go ahead and actually color this right away, just because it makes my life a little bit easier for managing things. So I'll just make it a little purple. There we go. Okay. So next thing, and I'm just going to build this like a cool beat first. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to centralize my entire percussion workflow right now through the TR8. I have some other percussion modules, but I don't think that I want to use them right now. Also, the benefit of doing this, right, is that if I start tracking all my drums and percussion through the same preamp with the same kind of distortion profile and harmonic profile, it gives it that sense of like kind of glue that you would get from like recording through into the same console or something, which is a subtle thing, but goes a long way. So next what I'm going to do is mess with some bass drum action. And I'm going to do a 707 style bass drum. So let's hear what that sounds like. So this is really, really distorted, really saturated. So if I roll back my preamp gain a little bit, right, you can actually hear that the preamp, the more I turn it up, the more it turns, it's eating the low end. So there's a 707, right? There's my normal one, my kind of healthy 707. So I'm going to engage the EQ circuit again. Just try to beef this signal up a little, this kick up a little more. So again, I'm trying to get my gain staging right and not hit the distortion too hard. But now something really fun to do, I find, with kick drums, and this is a sound kind of getting now a little bit more into like this hybrid sound design vibe, is purposely come in too hard with the kick into your converters. So check it out. So as you can see, I am recording way too loud. Now, one of the benefits of actually doing this, and by the way, I'm working on an Apollo X6, which is like pretty good in terms of conversion. I'd say honestly, I use it for mastering when I'm sending things out and coming back in. Things sound great, so it's pretty high end conversion. Not top of the top, but it's quite high end. You can honestly do this trick with like a Focusrite Scarlett. Honestly, if you just come in super hot, what it actually does is it creates square waves. That's what distortion is effectively. It's hitting a output ceiling that it can't go through anymore. So the harder you push it into it, the more it just flattens that top out and pushes back down to the audio. And that's when you hear the sensation of distortion. So it can get a little woody and knocky, right? If you distort, especially a kick drum, like too hard. But there's a sweet spot, especially on like converters. For some reason, when you clip converters, where you get this snappiness, this kind of transient addition that like really around like the top, right? And this is even a trick that not so much anymore, but that mastering engineers sometimes use, called soft clipping, right? Where you purposely come in too hot to the converters so that it actually creates almost a certain level of compression as well, right? So that is actually what distortion is it's a certain type of compression that just has a lot crazier artifacts, right? Because what you're doing is you're hitting a ceiling, and that's almost like your threshold. That's like hitting a brick wall limiter. You can't push through there. So the harder you hit it, the more it's going to give it a limited sound. It's just going to be super aggressive in the saturation. So what works really nicely is when you do that with a kick drum. You can get this kind of tightened, beefy sound that has a nice bit of snap to it. It's just going to accentuate what I already designed, right? So I'm going to go ahead and record this. I am not sure why it didn't. That's weird. So the obvious problem here, right, is that these are now clipping like heinously. And so there's a really easy way to solve this in both Logic and Ableton. And what that is you're just going to, in Ableton, you'll just double click and pull up your clip view. In Logic, you just come in here, and I'm just going to turn down the gain, right? And so what I'm left with is these super, see that? You can see literally where the distortion is happening. This nice aggressive square wave. So next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, let's see, yeah, I'm going to use a combination of this drum machine and some plugins to get a kind of cool hi-hat sound. Something that's a little bit more like interesting than just a typical 808 hi-hat. So let me go ahead and create some sort of hi-hat pattern real quick. Let's see, why is that looping in such a weird way? All right. So what I might do right now is just drag these clips into Logic's new kind of session view, if you want to call it, loop view, right? So instead of having to worry about it looping around and screwing up, especially the timing on here, I can just work in here. Now, I don't want to actually use, I don't want to use the distortion from my external hardware in this case for the hi-hats, because I find that I don't really like squared off hi-hats. They sound kind of like awful. And so I want to get something that's a little bit like a smoother distortion that I can control. So it's still going to involve some sort of low-level square waves, but I'm going to go ahead and open up first Fab Filter. Use Saturn 2. So I'm gonna try to mimic some tape. So see, what I like there is that I can control the style of distortion a little bit more and get a cooler like tape feel, so to speak, on that area. Whoa. All right, let's slow down. Let's try this again. So I like to do this thing where I'm designing the sound as I'm tracking, because then I'm going to adjust slightly what I'm doing with the source sound as I'm doing some of the processing. So I'm going to put on like a kind of phaser on here as well. Or actually maybe some kind of weird delay. This thing is really fun for getting a weird kind of out there sound. So I'm digging that. That kind of gives it a weird off-kilter position in the mix, which I really dig. So now I like those hi-hats. What I'll do is I'll jump back into this view. There we go. And now I'll just hit record. So you might have been wondering, like, why did you just record 16 bars when you only recorded so little for the other ones? Well, the answer is that with hi-hats, especially for me personally, I really like to have as much variation in articulation as possible, right? So what's cool about the TRA is that it like mimics this analog circuit behavior, so it's not going to reproduce the identical waves every time. And so I wanted to give a little bit of this like kind of rising, falling, tonal, textural quality that's happening across the performance over a long enough period of time so that your ear feels like it's a little more natural. And then coupled with this delay, it really gives it a sense of like being alive. We're getting a real kind of 80s vibe going here. So one thing I might do, and I do this all the time, right, is like a quick little bit of EQing. And this is a cool EQ from a company called Boz Digital, where I feel like it's a little bit crazy at like 11-ish. Yeah, just you know, roll it back a bit. My personal preference for hi-hats is to have them a little more relaxed in the mix and not like too forward. I really come from like a background of like I love rock music and jazz, where the high frequencies sort of are almost like sitting behind other things that are poking out, whereas a lot of time electronic music, it's like it's sitting really forward. I've never particularly been a fan of that. Okay, so now what I would do is let's get some cool digital stuff involved in here, right? So I might try to look for a sample that I want to layer on every other clap. What I'm going to do is try to find maybe a cool like synth percussion sample. Let's see. That's cool. I like that one. So this is a little bit of like a synth flick. Now I could create this myself, but sometimes if you just have access to the sound, and it's a high quality one, just use the damn sound, right? You don't need to be a Puritan just for the sake of it. That's what I always used to do, and it drove me crazy. All right, so let's check this sound. So I'm going to put that wide and just very simply use, or actually, you know what? I'm going to use Soundtoys Micro Shift to get that out wide. Well, and the reason I'm going to use that is because this is going to put it out there inconsistently. So the number one thing, right, that you're going to start seeing from me is I am obsessed with things being inconsistent, with asymmetry. I hate it when something sounds predictable. That's just my taste. This is a super tiny sample. I'm going to drag it over there. Like that, okay. I like that a lot. So that gives it that cool little snap out wide on every other snare. So what I'll do is, I'll just glue these together and create my own loop, which I can now use because it's literally the same sample, so it doesn't matter if it's the same thing over and over again. So that's what that sounds like, which is super cool. I'm going to increase this detune, which sort of makes it slightly shift a little bit in the stereo field. This is basically just a really low grade chorus. By low grade, I just mean that it doesn't do it in an intense way. It's super high grade in terms of quality. Let's do that. So again, I'm hearing a little bit of madness up way high, about 16K. Sounds a little less harsh. Now, I'm also going to, some people probably would argue against doing this, but I'm going to just reduce that, sub content that's happening. That's super sub content, right down there. So I like it actually to be cushiony. So 50 hertz is fine to me. Right about there is nice. I just don't want that subsonic boom that's going to actually drag the mix down when I don't need that in this sound. Now that area that's going, that moment, I'm going to layer another sample on top of that. So I'll go ahead, first of all, name this, right? So let's call this my Rezo Snap Clap. Rezo Snap Clap. Layer it right up there. And now I'm going to look for, I'm actually not really sure what I'm going to look for. I want to find something cool to layer with that sound. So maybe I'll go ahead and try to find a non-drum machine sample. Try to find some weird, more organic type of sound. Actually, you know what? Now that I'm thinking about it and hearing it, maybe I will, in fact. I'll just keep going down this kind of like weird synth. Yeah, I think I'm actually going to use like some synth percussion for that. So I'll actually just take my mini log. Let's see, where is this guy plugged in? And I'm going to go ahead and sorry, excuse me, my wrist is feeling a little funky. I'm going to go ahead and plug my mini log into the exact same preamp that I've been running all my other percussion through. And that way it's going to give it a little bit of glue. And I'm going to create a cool sound to try to layer in here. Yeah, so input 5. So I'll come to just. All right, so that's the preset sound, like the default sound rather. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off the oscillators and turn up the noise. This is one of the best ways to make synth percussion, is to just completely deactivate the kind of harmonic oscillators and turn on the purely tonal oscillator, right? Or atonal oscillator, whatever you want to call it, I don't know. Where there's not a lot of harmonic information in here. That's fun. So you got to kind of, I'm going to boost that. Turn that sustain down. Cool. So let me play with that. Okay, so I could play it, but what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to try to MIDI program something in here to make it a little more feel. Right, so I'm going to pull up and set up my MIDI configuration. Input 5. So port 1, channel 4 is where I have my mini log set up. So you'll see. Comes right through on here. And I'm going to create a kind of double note situation, like that. That's what I want. I'm going to turn up the velocity sensitivity. So you can hear. I think a mini log as a first synth is an awesome choice, Luis. It's really hands-on, really simple. Everything is showed to you right in front of you, and I think like it sounds better than it sounds more expensive than it actually costs. It really is an awesome sounding synth. I think especially for like ambient music and like making little like weird synth percussion stuff. The filter is super gooey, really, really nice, really, really nice round quality to it. It can be a little thin, but you honestly can solve that with if you super. I honestly haven't ever found that it's been thin once I started running it through an analog preamp. It just was like, whoa, this is so much more body. Okay, so that's all I want to do is a little, right? What I'm going to do, though, is this. Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. So it's kind of like this little like weird laser beam shot type of situation. Now what I'm going to do is again, I'm going to monitor it right here. And I'm going to, that's because where I'm going to track it. I'm going to actually use the micro shift again. Now, it might not sound good because this might smear the transient too much and defeat the point of kind of like using the synth to get this real cool, like weird, sharp juxtapositional tone. But it also might smear it in a way that sounds cool. So I just don't know. I'm just going to see. In my opinion, that sounds fucking sick. I kind of like style too, but the beauty of digital is I can change it whenever I want, right? So instead of having to commit. So I love like combining a really warm, strong source tone from analog and then using digital to like do something cool with it that I couldn't necessarily do in analog. So I'll call this my synth. I'll call these like noise hats or something. I don't know. They're not really hi-hats, but noise perk. Okay. I might do another one, so I'm going to do noise perk 1. So I might get adventurous out here. Cool. So as you can see, again, I'm going all 16 bars here so that I can exhaust, or not exhaust, but so I can get a really nice tonal dynamic variation of what's occurring, right? It's not going to be the same every time. I like that. Now, if you want it to be the same every time, you can then pilfer from here and choose the best one. Sometimes you need it to be the same, right? Sometimes you're trying to get a really stable percussive part. But right now, I kind of do this thing where I kind of try to make like synth music a little bit psychedelic and a little bit like more natural as opposed to more unnatural. That's just my, sorry. That's just my taste. Now, what I'm also hearing is I really want to like, so it goes. Now the drum that responds to this is the kick, right? Which is cool, but it's almost like a little bit disguised tonally. It's not really locked in there. I'm not emphasizing it so strongly. So I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take another like I can make like a bongo sound from my TR8, which is fun because it's super fake sounding, but I can make something really cool and layer it into that exact spot. Ooh. That's quite a bit of bite to it. I like that. So now what I might do is actually apply some reverb from the TR8. That sounds nice. Maybe throw a little delay on it, a little slap back. I love that little bit. It's that little teeny bit of delay. Kind of gives it like almost like a Benson kind of vibe. Which is a style of like a tape delay. Yeah, so I'll call that TR8 bongo. Also, the little that's happening, the little on the top of the bongo, is like kind of like masking together with the clickly pop things outside on the outside of the mix, which sounds super sick. So I love that. Yeah, it's like making that tone, like that texture linger in the air almost, and then the down, the resonant snap, like the synth snap, is almost like hammering it down. It's like it's floating in the air and then bringing it down. And snaps it closed. Love that. All right, and as you know, I'm all about that tonal variation. So I'm just gonna leave this the way it is, especially because like with the delay, they've also like, you know, modeled these delays so that they become a little bit like, again, they have these like slight variation in them. So I now have this dope beat that I just built. And I kind of want to, that the first upbeat, maybe I want to also accentuate with another percussion sound that I'll source from the TR8. Maybe just like a weird, just like again, something really subtle. Something that just, you don't necessarily hear it, but you feel it. Maybe like a rounded out, like a really muted snare drum or something from the 909. You turn on all the snappiness on the 909, you get this result. From, which I find funny and cool. Almost turns into a tom. Which, if you actually know anything about drums, makes complete sense because a snare drum is just a tom drum that has a chain at the bottom of it. Too much. So if I'm going to make it that quiet, I'll just gain stage that in, as opposed to having to drag the fader all the way down. I want to bring it in super quiet. I'm going to use the same micro shift setting. Maybe I'll So really quiet, right? I'm having it mixed in there super quietly. So it goes middle out. Maybe I'll put on a little like rim snare from like on there as well. Yeah. So that sound. So it tracks a little bit higher up, frequency-wise. So now what it kind of sounds like is it's just like a variation in the hi-hat almost. So I like to do that where I'm like masking things and like blending things together so that it's just like this little bit of tonal variation, right? I always explain to students that rhythm is not about when, it's about how and when, right? So it's like about the tone that plays it, not just what time it's being played at, right? Not just quarter note, eighth note. It's like, what's the tonal relationship of those two things? How are they being expressed? That creates rhythm more than anything. So I'll just call this like subtle perk layer. And I know it's coming on the upbeat, right? So I'll call it subtle upbeat perk layer. Not upbeat as in happy, upbeat as it literally is coming on an upbeat. And with that, again, I'm going to make that. We'll listen. Really quiet, right? Cool. So now I just built this whole loop using a combination of some digital plugins, right, with my drum machine percussion. I'm pretty happy with it. So, I think what maybe next time we could do is next week I'll continue to build on this. I unfortunately have to go and take care of some things related to my own music. That being said, thank you everyone for joining in on this stream. Again, my name is Lewis Beck. I love doing this little hand drag thing. Oh, pushing it away. And this was 343 Labs TV Hybrid Home Studio. So for those of you that were joining for the first time, thank you for being here. For those of you that were coming back, thank you again for returning. And we hope to see you next week. Don't forget that tomorrow, our fearless leader, Max Wild, will be doing Theory Thursdays. And in the end screen at the end of the stream, you will see exactly the topic that he's covering and when it'll be. If you dug the content, please hit subscribe if you're not already. And we will see you soon. All right. Take it easy.